Hello, welcome to the basics of immigration issues. Unlawful immigration, push, pull, and impediments. Part 1. Today I'm going to talk about unlawful immigration. I've divided this into 2, maybe 3 different segments, but they do all go together. Feel free to watch them together or one at a time. When the topic of issues with our immigration system comes up, perhaps the most popular topic, at least amongst the general population, is unlawful or illegal immigration. I'll use those terms interchangeably. Why is it such a popular topic? One reason is because it gets talked about a lot, and the more something gets talked about, the more people want to talk about it. In the immigration community, there may be other topics that perhaps are more pressing and more popular, but in the general public, this is certainly one that gets a lot of attention. We'd be here a very long time. But I am going to give you some basic concepts, my perspective of what unlawful immigration looks like, why it happens, and a tiny bit about what we can do to solve it. I also invite you to think about, if this is what causes it, what would you do to try to solve some of these problems? Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. To start with, I'm going to talk about how someone can be in the country illegally. Okay? There are 2 basic ways. The first one is probably what comes to your mind when you hear unlawful immigration or illegal immigration. People come without permission. They sneak in to the country. Now, they could come in a variety of different ways. Obviously, the southern border, crossing through the southern border, is an image that's very common to us, and it is a common way for people to be able to come in. But if you think about the United States territory, we have many different ways. We have islands that are part of our territory. We have multiple borders. So people could walk, drive, swim, fly, come on a boat. There are lots of different ways that they could sneak in and come not at a port of entry. All of us are supposed to come into the country through a port of entry. Someone's not coming through a port of entry and they're just sneaking in. That would be coming without permission. Maybe they're coming through a port of entry and not presenting themselves for inspection. Think of being hidden in a car or a cargo truck or something like that. So technically they've gone through the port of entry, but they didn't present themselves for inspection. Those would be ways of coming without permission. People come from the north, from the south, like I said, from the sides. So that's one way that people can be here unlawfully. The other big way that people come is they do what we call overstay. If you remember from our discussion about non-immigrants come to the United States with a non-immigrant visa that's for a specific time to do a specific thing. When their time has run out, their time that they were permitted to be in the country, if they continue to stay here, they are here unlawfully. This has become, over the last couple of decades, an increasingly large problem. Larger and larger numbers of people in the United States who are here unlawfully are here because they are overstays. They came with a visa and they didn't leave when they were supposed to. There are punishments for that, but for some people, it's worth the risk of staying. And that brings us to, why do people come unlawfully? That's what we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about today. Before we get into the general factors, I do want to say one thing. If you truly want to know why people come into the United States unlawfully, the best way to find out is to ask them. There are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people who have come unlawfully or overstayed, who are here in the United States unlawfully. They're each an individual. They are human beings. They are not just numbers. They are not animals. They are human beings. They have reasons for the decisions that they make. And I find it enlightening to talk to them about why they've come to the United States, especially unlawfully. It's actually very, very difficult to live in the United States without permission to be here. So why would you do that? So ask them, find out, what are your reasons? Now, having said that, let's talk about some of the general reasons why people come into the United States unlawfully. And for that matter, why they come into the United States at all, why they migrate here. A lot of the reasons are the same, not all of them, but a lot of the things are the same. When I was a little girl, well, not that little, like a young teenager in junior high, we learned about immigration. And we learned about push and pull factors. At that time in my life, I had no idea that immigration would be such a huge part of my life. But when I think about this topic, it reminds me of those classes because those factors are still what drives immigration. Everyone who goes from one place to another place, there are push and pull factors, whether you're talking about the 1700s or 2017 or today. So really quickly, before I get into what I think some of the major push and pull factors are, I want to ask you, what has made you move in your life? What has been a driving force? Push factors, pull factors? Why did you move? And certainly if you've moved countries or you have ancestors who've moved countries, what made them push or pull? What made them leave a country or come to another country? So when we talk about push, we're talking about things that send somebody out of a country. We're leaving one country. And when we're talking about pull, we're talking about factors that bring you to this country. Okay, with push factors, what I think is the number one reason why people leave countries is instability in those countries. Why they leave and immigrate unlawfully, I should say, illegally without permission, is because they're leaving a country where there's instability. That instability could come from war. There is more war today than there has ever been around the world. And so people are moving, they're fleeing and getting away from the danger and the instability created because there's war in their country. We have war, we have political instability. These are often happening at the same time, but sometimes political instability happens without war. We have governments that can't function properly, people fighting over the government, and other reasons that create political instability, which then affects the normal people's lives. I'll come back to that in just a minute. And finally, with instability, I'll put gangs. In the Americas, especially, when I talk to people who are here illegally, who came illegally, it's often related to gangs in their country. Gangs that are targeting them or their children or even their siblings, and they know it's going to come to them next. And the government's unable to control the gangs, and so they need to get out to save their lives or their families' lives. So all of these are things where people don't feel safe. Their basic needs are not being met, and they fear for themselves, they fear for their families. And because of that, they need to get out, and they need to get out quickly. There's no time to sit there and wait for years while the immigration process happens. They need to leave quickly. And that quickness is a large part of why they come unlawfully without following the processes. We've seen this in places like Venezuela. Just the last few years, there's been a huge spike in people coming from Venezuela. That's not a common country where people come to the United States, but it has become because their country is dissolving into chaos and people want to be safe and have their families be safe. When I think of this one especially, but any of these push factors, I think of water. If you have water that has, your hose has broken or there's a leak in a dam or whatever it is, there's a little trickle of water, and sometimes that water goes where it's supposed to go or it goes just one little place. But as the pressure builds and more water is coming through, that water starts to go wherever it can go. And so when I think of people leaving countries with these situations, it's water leaking through and it's going to go somewhere. And so the United States is one of the places that it goes. And obviously when something completely breaks, then there's a whoosh of water flooding in. And again, you can think of this when you look at countries where they're just dissolving into not just a few problems, but it's just total chaos there. You're going to get a flood of people who are going somewhere, anywhere, like that water that just goes where it can to keep moving. You're going to get people who will go where they can to land somewhere where they feel safe and feel like they can take care of themselves and their families. So instability, huge factor, has become more so. That's why such huge numbers of people are moving all over the world. There's so much movement, and largely because of these factors right here. The other big factor has always been a factor. Well, all of these really have always been a factor, but certainly one that many of us are familiar with throughout the history of the United States is when people in their home countries, they face poverty and a lack of opportunity. There's poverty where you can get out of it, and there are societies where there's no opportunity to change that. And so you're looking at your family and you're saying, we don't have shelter, we don't have food, we have health issues, and there's nothing I can do. There aren't jobs here. There is no opportunity to get out of this. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can get out of it. So I'm going to go find a place where I can work and I can take care of my needs and my family's needs. Poverty has always pushed people. It's always driven parts of migration, and it probably always will. So these are some of the big push factors pushing people out of their home countries to come to the United States. And again, to come unlawfully because of urgency or lack of opportunities in the system to be able to come lawfully.